Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's meeting on Thursday, the 17th of July. This is a public meeting, and members of the public and press are permitted to report on the proceedings. Reporting includes filming, photography, making an audio recording, and providing commentary on proceedings. Please note this meeting is recorded and streamed live. These recordings are published on the relevant meeting page of the Council's website. By choosing to attend the public meeting, you are deemed to have given your consent to being filmed or recorded for any footage to be broadcast or published. If the alarm sounds, the premises must be evacuated immediately. Do not spend time collecting personal belongings. All emergency escape routes are clearly signed. Once you've left the building, the assembly point is the High Street opposite the Guildhall. And the most important thing, please use your microphone when speaking so it's picked up for YouTube. Thank you. So I believe we are a full house with no substitutes. Do I have any declarations of interest? I'm not sure that's applicable particularly today. No. The third agenda item is the minutes of the previous committee. You won't have received them. This is because it was a long meeting and the preparation of the minutes has been delayed by some IT issues. They'll be brought to August committee for approval. Then we've got agenda item 4. This is the minutes of the Conservation Advisory Panel. And Jenny, you were there, weren't you? Yeah. We appreciate, obviously, the Conservation Panel looking at these. And obviously, you know, we're just noting them, that we've received them. Yeah.
For future reference, there is some doubt about how the Conservation Advisory Panel will move forward,
Yes.
but that hasn't been determined yet. So obviously this committee will need to be kept informed
Absolutely.
of how that goes.
Yeah, I think once we know what is going and the timetable for it as well, we will definitely keep people informed, because it could be that it needs some explanation as well. Okay, great, thank you. We have no public participation, so if we move to item 6, this is the Planning Committee Annual Report, and Paul's just going to give us a brief introduction.
Thank you, Chair, and afternoon, members. So this is our yearly report, which I think is the second year in its presentation to members. It sets out a review of what happened over 24-25 in terms of the municipal year, setting out how that the Planning Committee performed, how that the performance of the planning service as a whole in terms of planning applications, in terms of enforcement, and it also sets out the complaints and feedbacks that we've had, along with some policy matters as well in terms of how the planning service has operated over the last 12 months. I'm really proud of what my team has done and the planning service as a whole. You will recall where this service was 2.5 or 3 years ago, and we're in a really good, solid position. One of the important things is that the Council has acknowledged the need to maintain personnel within the service, and whilst there has been some redundancies across the wider service, we have been able to go out for recruitment for a vacancy for a planning officer to maintain the development management statistics, which is really positive, particularly given the economic climate that we find the council in. In terms of the appeals and those that are relevant, you'll notice that the appeal of note in 7.3 was particularly 13 Greenford Gardens, and also at 7.2, 250 Bath Road. 250 Bath Road was one that members considered, and we felt that a 7-bed HMO was far too much, and you'll remember that Highways also objected on those grounds. We did agree a 4-bedroom HMO as being the maximum that would be allowed. Unfortunately, the inspector didn't agree with this council or the Highway Authority and has allowed the appeal for a 7-bed house in multiple occupation. Similarly with Greenford Gardens, it was something that officers worked with local ward members in terms of getting the right evidence. But again, the inspector has taken a very clear and almost crystal view of those issues, and has come down that it should be allowed, and that's something that's being progressed with ward members as well in terms of how that goes forward. It is disappointing when you lose appeals, but those are just a couple that have been highlighted. You'll notice that we are making great inroads in terms of those that are being dismissed, that we've got a huge amount that are being dismissed, and it's still a great proportion of the appeals that we get. So, in summary, the recommendation is that the annual report is approved and that it is sent to Council for information, but I'm happy to take any questions that anybody has on the report. Before I close, the one thing that has been highlighted to me, there is an error in 5.1, just before the table. It should be the statistics for 24-25 rather than 23-24. But apart from that, and with that correction, the report is recommended to you for approval.
Great, thank you, Paul. So has anyone got any questions, please? Start with you, Councillor Amos.
The questions and comments come under the same category? Yeah, it makes it a lot easier. Well, first of all, can I congratulate the planning department on what I think is a good report, good performance. The quality and speed of the decisions is excellent. So I think we should put praise where praise is due, just as I put criticism where criticism is due. But just a couple of questions. I think I know the answers, but I always like to hear the actual answer, just in case. Paragraph 8.2, if I may, Chair, I've got two questions. That's the first one. 8.2, where it says, in 2023-24, 274 cases were received, but we actually investigated and dealt with 380. Now, that's an interesting concept. You deal with more cases than you've had in. I'm assuming that is a backlog being worked out. So therefore, presumably, the answer to 24.5 is 261 received. They dealt with 291. So again, do I assume we're more or less now got the backlog behind us?
Through you, Chair, that's a really good question, and you're correct in terms of that we are dealing with those cases that are from the previous year. So just in terms of, I don't like really to use the word backlog, but in terms of those cases that were on hand, when you look at Q4 of 22-23, so at the end of March 23, we had 293 enforcement cases on hand. In March 24, that was down to 175, and of March 25, we're down to 149. So when you think that in 23 we were near as we can as 300, and in March 25, 2 years later, we're as near as you can at 150, I think it just shows the efforts that have been made in terms of reducing those enforcement cases.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. That's why I acknowledged that in my introductory comments. And then my second question is paragraph, it's on 8.2, at the top of page 7. It's got a nice long list of the categories, but the biggest item is 84, which is operational development. Now, it reminds me of those lists where you get a massive long list and categories. You've got 10 here, 5 there, 4 there. 180 is other. And so it doesn't really tell us. So can Mr. Round just define what is operational development and why it doesn't fit into any of the other categories? Because certainly many of the ones I refer are change of use or a breach of condition. So I'm not sure whether I've had any in the 84 category because I don't know what they are.
So operational development is everything else. So if no, I jest slightly. So it's any construction work, so building an extension without planning permission or carrying out works. So as you'll notice, none of the categories that are set out there, other than works to a listed building, relate to building work. So it's any building works that are unauthorised. So yes, it's a very wide category. It might be something that I can talk to the team about next year, breaking that down a little bit more into sort of householder or commercial, so that you've got an idea of in terms of where that is.
Yes, thank you. I think that would be, I think, because it being such a big amorphous category, just to narrow it down a bit, I think would be helpful. But thank you. That's my questions and comments.
Thank you, Councillor Amos. I've got Councillor Cross.
Thank you very much. Yeah, really encouraging report, and you know, good performance as well. Just a couple of minor queries, please. Could we have sort of year-by-year tallies, say the last 3 years, on say the table in paragraph 5.1 and also 8.2, please?
Through you, Chair. At 8.2, the 3 years are already provided in that part. But for 5.1, I'm quite happy to do that. So for major applications in 22-23, there was 100%. For 23-24 was 100% again. And as you'll see, 24-25 is 100%. And just to clarify, that is within time or within an agreed extension of time. For minor applications, 22-23 was 72%, 23-24 was 91%, and you'll see within the report that 24-25 was 93%. And then for others, for 22-23, 89%, 23-24, 96%, and then you'll see that there's been a slight dip in terms of 24-25 to 94%. Householders, 22-23, 90%, 23-24, 98%, and again, a slight dip down to 96% for 24-25. And then just as an additional, in terms of the 6-week deadline, which is something that I think we are quite proud of in paragraph 5.2, that for last year, we had 40% of householder applications, so that's nearly half of all householder applications are dealt with within 6 weeks. The statutory time is 8 weeks. So 22-23, only 17% were dealt with within 6 weeks, 23-24, 38%, and then you'll see 40%. But just as a note, in Q4, so of March this year, 53% of householder applications were dealt with within 6 weeks, and majority of those within 5 weeks. So when we've got residents who want to build and they want to extend, we are delivering that when it is acceptable within a really good time, and we're showing good service improvement.
Yeah, and I think that's evident actually in that you've got so many compliments. I think people are less likely to compliment than to complain, and to have had 11 compliments is obviously, you know, a reflection of that service that they're receiving. I've got Councillor Kinsley.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. Just on that point about complaints and compliments, is it as easy to make a compliment as it is a complaint on the website? As a matter of interest, is there sort of a button? Sorry, that's a supplementary question.
Through you, yes, it's exactly the same form. So if you do get residents who want to make compliments, please direct them to the compliments. I think it's called feedback, or let us know, something like that, on the council's website, and you can fill in a compliments part of it as well.
Okay, thank you for that. The thing that I particularly wanted to raise is, it's again on section 8, has already been referred to, planning enforcement. So firstly, just building on the conversation that we had earlier, perhaps an extra metric that might be useful to have in that section is the level of the backlog. So it's quite, and I think that's quite a useful figure at that end, end of Q4 of each year. What is the backlog? And then that shows the good progress that you're making in tackling that. But the main point that I wanted to ask about was in relation to that table. What I was interested to kind of see, and I couldn't tease it out from the numbers, is the amount of work that the enforcement team does in relation to HMO management plans and the conditions associated with those. Just as we get a lot of commentary on the doorstep about how effective is this process being, and it would be good to be able to reassure our residents that if a breach of condition is reported, that it will be followed up. And I don't know if it's possible to tease that number out from the figures that are there in the table. Thank you.
It was very helpful that you provided that in advance so that I could provide that for the committee. So in terms of complaints since 2022, we've had 22 complaints for HMOs, and 2 of those have been in relation to breach of conditions of management plans, and both of those complaints have been resolved in terms of dealing with the owners and making sure that the management plan is adhered to.
Thank you. So not that many were reported to you, but where they were reported, you were able to follow up effectively. Thank you. Thank you.
I've got Councillor Agar.
Thank you, Chair. A few things here. I'll be as brief as I can. Firstly, congratulations on the level of performance, because I think it must be obvious to all of us about the meticulousness, the depth and range of work that's been undertaken, the reduction in the backlog, and the excellence of management. I mean, all of that comes together, and it shows in the statistics and in the report itself. So, you know, really well done. Pre-application advice. I'm not entirely clear on how well that has helped you and the applicants to give you the kind of information that you need in order to progress an application, because we are looking at still a fairly substantial amount of leeway needed when considering applications to actually get enough to go forward. So that's one thing. And the other thing is enforcement. I mean, I think that the second item in 8.4, that looks like the one that Charlotte was dealing with. Is that right? Yes, because that was a very complex matter, and it took quite a lot of time and so forth to deal with it, a lot of negotiation. But, you know, it was an excellent result when it was finally resolved, and it goes to show that enforcement is not always simple, and it does take time, but persistence and diplomacy can work really well, and it has done. So, you know, that was great. And it was over in St John's. So the pre-application stuff I wanted to know a bit more about.
In terms of pre-application advice, and through you, Chair, is we're looking at growing that service, and it's about confidence in the team. We are getting pre-application inquiries in. We're not getting them at the level that I'd like to see that are influencing planning applications. So whilst we're getting some of the larger applications and we're getting pre-apps, sometimes you'll find that agents or applicants will go through the motions with those because that's what they feel they need to do. So in terms of whether it's making a positive difference, it is, but not on the scale that I would like to see at this moment in time. So the things that we are promoting through the Agents Forum and similar events, and with agents as we meet with them, we are promoting the service, and it's about not only promoting the service, but be able to have the team that can provide the quality feedback that is robust, and that professionally there is some respect in terms of that advice that is given. So it is something that we are growing, but at the moment we're not seeing the levels that I would like to see in terms of the impact.
Yeah. Sorry. Could you give us an update on that at some point when at a suitable time?
Yeah, you're right. Do you want the line? Is it that one back there? Yeah, I mean, I think that's really important, Pat. You know, I often, when residents come to me and say, oh, do you think I'll get planning for this? I say, you really just need to do a pre-app. You know, you get a really good idea of whether your project is going to have, you know, some significant hurdles, you know. It's really worthwhile. So we need to really encourage that, don't we? Because I do know that there's a huge amount of work done by officers when we get applications in as well, and negotiation. Isn't there, Paul? I thought, even when people don't do a pre-app. Is that all right? Yeah, can you see? That's all right. So the sun is moving around, isn't it? Look at that, that's great, yeah. So there is a significant amount of like toing and froing going on as well to improve the applications. You know, sometimes I think when we see them at committee, they are much improved to when I first saw them in the first place, which we appreciate as well. Do we have any other questions or comments at all? No? Okay, well, I would like to just reiterate really, we're actually so, I think it's a great privilege actually to have a team who are this committed and are doing so well. And actually, the strong commitment of the team in many ways, and there's clear service improvements through the data, and obviously the feedback we're also getting from residents. I know that people getting a decision quickly when they want to build, they might be having a baby or have got a vulnerable, relative moving in, they need to make a change quickly. That has a real impact on someone's life, but also, the enforcement, when someone cuts down a tree and people have lived next to that tree for years, it's great that we can take action and, get new trees put in and take the action. Obviously, we prefer it not to happen in the first place, but there you go. I suppose what underpins all of this work is really good policy, and obviously that is being updated. I didn't know whether, Hannah, you could just give us an update on the timescale for everyone on committee for new policies coming in that we're going to have to look at.
Yes, so you'll have seen that there has been an update, recent traffic on the examination website with the inspector's post-hearing note. That is following hearings that took place earlier this year on the SWDPR. We are currently on track to hopefully bring what can be found sound plan to council for adoption late this year, possibly slipping into early next year. So we are roughly aligned with our local development scheme as published. That plan will replace the SWDP, which is currently adopted, so the plan you make decisions against in its fullness, and produce a new set of policies for decision making.
Thank you, Chair. So, members, whilst there is delegated authority to the head of planning to comment and provide comments on planning consultations from the government, we felt it was prudent to report this matter to Planning Committee to obtain any further views that they might wish to have. The government published this consultation and I've provided it in full.
Is it landing in the car park? Is it landing on the car park? Got panels for the building.
I think it's as a result of the last item. It's got the banner behind it, well done planning team. But
Yeah, I understand.
So the consultation was published on the 28th of May and they are seeking comments by, I think it's the 23rd of July. I've provided it in full so that members had a full idea of exactly what the government's aims and ideas are. The report has tried to extract a few of the salient details. The first being that in terms of delegation of planning functions, and you'll notice that the government are looking at a national scheme of delegation which would apply to all English councils, and it would apply a two-tier rule. The first tier, which would be only for officer delegation without any ability to refer to planning committee, and the second item with a tier of applications that could go to planning committee subject to certain tests, and a gateway test which they're considering in terms of the chair of planning committee and the head of planning. I've provided some comments and some details in terms of what that would look like. Just to give members an idea in terms of what they've considered over the last 12 months or so at Planning Committee. So in the year 24, so January to December 2024, Planning Committee considered 20 applications. If the national scheme of delegation were to be imposed, that would be only 9 applications rather than the 20. And all of those applications were either council-related applications, council buildings, or applications made by councillors. So in terms of other applications, it wouldn't apply to any of them. So for the 6 months of 2025, you have, believe it or not, considered 18 applications already. If the national scheme was imposed, that would only be 8 applications. And you might have guessed, all of those applications would be council-related applications or councillor-related applications. So for Worcester City, one of the comments that you'll have seen that we've made is that we feel that one size doesn't fit all, and we haven't quite said it in those terms, but looking with binoculars from London and seeing larger conurbations and larger areas, it might work. Or if they're looking further down the track and looking at all unitary authorities as part of the local government reorganisation, again, this might be something that will work. But for smaller district councils such as ourselves, it certainly wouldn't provide that level of democracy and the community scrutiny that the consultation talks about. And it's one thing that the chair pointed out before the meeting. You just look on page 29, which is the introduction to the consultation. The government's aim, it says in paragraph 1, planning is principally a local activity because decisions about what to build and where should be shaped by local communities and reflect the views of local residents. And I think from an officer's point of view, to be able to do that effectively and to meet the government's aim as they set out within the introduction, this national scheme of delegation doesn't really help us as a small district council to be able to do those things. So those are just my comments in terms of the first element. In terms of the second element, in terms of the size and composition of committees, officers have no issues with that. The recommendation is that a maximum of 11 members sit on a planning committee, and Worcester City already have 11 members as a maximum, so that doesn't cause us any issues. Similarly with matter 3, in terms of mandatory training, again, as officers, we feel that that training that we provide actually works really well. And the feedback that we get from members is that that is the case, and we constantly try and shape training to be able to meet members' needs. And as you know, we do occasionally put on additional training to be able to help with that. In terms of delegated decision making and performance, again, there's something that is neither here nor there in some respects in the fact of the percentage on appeal. Again, you'll notice some comments in the report about how that officers feel that, yes, it is probably appropriate, but there should be a threshold in terms of the number of appeals. So as we have found that we haven't had, I don't think, any major appeals for the last 2 years, if we were suddenly to have one major appeal now and it just happened to be allowed, we would be at 100% rather than the 1% or the 10%. That doesn't really seem fair when you're dealing with larger authorities that, say, have 50, 60 major applications within 2 years and have an appeal process with that. So it's just tinkering around the edges. Officers have put together some questions in terms of draft, and what I think was the understanding for the item is that we have set out a recommendation for the Planning Committee to authorise the Head of Service in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair to submit the consultation based upon the draft in Appendix 1. I feel probably it is better to have a free flow of a discussion, and obviously at the discretion of the Chair, about this. And what I will endeavour to do is capture some of those thoughts so that we can input them into the consultation responses and then agree them with the Chair and the Vice Chair. If there is anything specific that members wish to change, obviously we will look at that, but that would need agreement with Chair and Vice Chair that they were happy with those changes. But I think effectively we're looking at, have officers got the right mix? Are we in the Goldilocks position that it's just right in terms of the response, or are we completely way off in terms of where members are in terms of their considerations? It could be that you feel like it's a really good thing, or you could think that it's an absolute terrible thing. So it's really opening up for members' comments, and I'm happy to take any questions as best as I can answer them.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. And I suppose if you want to give totally different responses anyway, you can do your own response.
Thank you, Chair. One thing I did agree with, Chair, is that once we have finalised the consultation responses, which we will do fairly quickly, I will send that round for all members to see, but also include the link. I will provide a link tomorrow of the government's website, because it's not just councils, it's seeking views from anybody. So if you wish to make your own response to the government's consultation, you can do so, and I will provide the link via Margaret in terms of to all members.
Okay, so I'll open the floor to questions. Councillor Amos, you go first again. Go on.
Yes, questions and comments, if I may, Chair. Thank you very much. I was wondering whether I should be disappointed by this, but I decided I'm not disappointed because this is inevitable. So I'm not surprised. It's inevitable. This clearly, Chair, is not designed in any way to help the Planning Committee become more efficient or more relevant or more useful. We've just had a report on which I and others, members of the committee, commended the Planning Department on the speed and quality of its decisions. So it's not about making the committee more efficient. In other words, that's an utter lie. What this is, Chair, and this is why I feel strongly about it, because I've been on this committee probably longer than anybody else, with the possible exception of Councillor Agar, through different governments and different parties and all the rest of it. But this is another calculated attack on local government. Let's be quite clear what this is. Calculated attack on local democracy. And I think, I fear, Chair, that this is the final nail in the coffin of a local planning committee as we've come to know it. Because they're getting rid of the district councils, they're now trying to control what the planning committees can do and what they can't do. And the particular thing that bothers me is the deliberate abolition of call-ins from local members. And obviously they're obsessed with it, because they actually mention it in two successive paragraphs. I think it's, here we are, 3.2 and 3.3, about removing member call-ins. So they're clearly worried for some reason about member call-ins. I mean, really, what's behind this? Well, what the government wants to do is they want to concrete over the whole of Worcester, and they want to do it as quickly as possible, and the planning committee is a damn nuisance because it gets in the way and it might have local views. It doesn't want local input, Chair. I certainly won't be voting in favour of any submission on consultation because they're not interested. It's dishonest. Now, when it comes to this committee, Chair, members, of all parties do their best to represent their constituents. They take an interest, and I in particular, if need be, call an application in, to give residents an opportunity to think they've got some involvement in how their community is going to be changed for good, changed for permanent. And they come here and they make their case, they prepare their speeches, and they hope we listen, they hope we take account of it. That's all gone. That is now impossible. It's banned. The government is banning that. And I think what it is, the politest word I can come up with, is it's disrespectful. And this is central government all over. Both parties, you know, the last Tory government was as useless as this Labour government is. It's disrespect from central government to local government. It's contempt. So I think it's completely dishonest, Chair, in its intentions. It's not about helping democracy. It's designed to do exactly the opposite. I've had, as you will know, Chair, Council, disputes with another government department who doesn't believe in transparency and all the rest of it. Home Office, they just lied to us about another matter. And this department, they're not going to listen to anything we say. They've made their mind up, and I think it's tragic. It's tragic. And who is the Secretary of State? Can you remind me? Who is, I mean, I don't know. It's a DLHUC, whatever that hell that stands for. Which one is it? Does anybody know? No. You see, there we are. Nobody even knows who the Secretary of State is. It's alarming. So Chair, I'll stop at that point with the comments, but I just do have a couple of questions that the committee can, or the officers will answer. And they're very simple, two quick questions, actually, Chair. It's on 3.2 and 3.3. 3.2, Tier A. These are the things you are not allowed to have any local representation on. This is where a decision is made behind closed doors, and if anybody objects, least of all councillors, well, tough luck. You're not involved. Members are excluded on Tier A. But what I would like to know, Chair, because this is fascinating, it says Tier A would apply to routine and non-contentious applications. Well, Mr. Round and I have had lots of discussions about, you define the word sustainable, and of course they can't. So I'm going to ask another question. Can somebody please define non-contentious? Because I'd like to know what is non-contentious and who's going to make that decision as to whether it's non-contentious. Because Mr. Round is a very nice, jovial, genial man. He might think that's non-contentious, but my constituents might think it is contentious, and I will always represent them, because that's my job. So that's the first thing. The second question I've got is on this question of call-ins. They mentioned it in 3.2. Call-ins are going to be banned. 3.3, the removal of the individual member call-in. Oh, they're scared stiff of this, aren't they? So can Mr. Round tell us, of all the applications the Planning Committee has determined in the last year, how many were call-ins? What is this great fear of this little number of call-ins? How many did we actually have? And the final question is, Chair, on paragraph 4, where it says conclusion, and I think it's a conclusion in every sense. It makes me, this is just for amusement, actually. It says it's about ensuring that democracy and public confidence in the planning system is not undermined. They're removing democracy. They're putting two fingers up to this committee, to this council, and they think public confidence is not going to be affected. I think it's tragic. I think it's shameful. I think it's dishonest. I'll have no part in making any submission, but I would like answers to those two questions, please.
Through you, Chair, in terms of what is contentious, the government have made that decision in terms of Tier A and Tier B. In terms of our local conditions at this moment in time, we allow the member call-in, and I think as you have expressed very clearly, that is a mechanism that we feel ought to still be there, and officers have made those points in terms of the comments that we are to provide back. But the government have taken the view that essentially major applications are the only ones that could be contentious. And I think across this room, we know that that's not the case. So that's the first point. The second point in terms of the conclusion, that's a conclusion that we wrote to try and set out what the government is proposed. And you'll notice that in words that were trying to be soft and nice, we've sort of said that members need to be, to consider it very carefully to ensure that democracy and public confidence. And I think that the principles that Councillor Amos has sort of aired already is that actually this is, I think you quoted, an attack on local democracy. So that might be something that you feel that are comments that need to be raised. And officers, that's the whole reason we put it before you. We felt that it was something that wasn't as straightforward, that we could just provide a response to. And a question that you asked that not within the last moment is the Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government is Angela Rayner.
Well, there we are. Nobody knew who the hell she was. But could you just answer the question, Mr. Andy, through you, Chair? The number of applications in the last year which were call-ins, what percentage?
I haven't got that to hand, but I can provide you that after the meeting.
Guess it's in single figures. I'll wait for the answer, but I think it's helpful for the committee to know, because factually, it's a very, very small figure. So why they've attacked such a small figure only raises my concerns even further, because they're not a problem on this committee. They never have been. So I don't know why they've taken against them so much. Presumably it's because it's local councillors exercising their democratic rights to represent their constituents. That's what the problem is for central government. Not just this one, any of them. They're all the same. They're all as bad.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Amos. I've got Councillor Agar now, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Alan, I would suggest you really do make your own response to this. I think you clearly have a number of things you want to say to them. There are a number of things I was thinking of. One is the role of human rights in this process, and where do the human rights of the individual resident or developer come in? The right to be heard and so forth is clearly not necessarily one that's going to be upheld, but in fact the government is signed up to the conventions on human rights, so that needs sorting out one way or another. I think I'm not quite sure whether enforcement should always come into tier A or not. I think it can be just as controversial as an application, so I'm not sure about that. And I'd like to see on question 18 particularly that urban design or design in general should be inclusive, and I think there are issues around that. It's not completely neutral at all. I mean, if you were to listen to the University of the West of England, and I did at a planning conference that I was at a number of years ago, they talked about women-friendly design, for example. I would say that is very essential. A lot of cities don't feel particularly friendly to certain categories of people, including protected characteristics. So I do think of disabled people. We have talked to disabled people, this council house, about, say, the design of our street furniture and stuff like that. We know that there are issues around design which are not necessarily inclusive at the moment, and we need to bear that in mind. So I would say that, question 18, design should be inclusive. That's really important. Other than that, I agree with Paul that some of the most contentious applications are not the large ones. Sometimes it's the householder ones that can be the most difficult to resolve in our minds and in actuality as well. So there needs to be a degree of flexibility on some of these things. I realise that we can't make law for just ourselves. We have to make it for the many, and we have to understand that because we're a high-performing service here, that not everybody's going to be, and that there are going to have to be safeguards here and, and gateways and all the rest of it. So yes, to some extent that's true. And I will say that in the past, and I've been on this committee for 20 years, or just over, and one of the things I have noticed over time, and I won't necessarily say it's happening now, but it has happened in the not too distant past, that some councillors have called in every darned application in their wards. And it costs, what, £1,000 to do? Maybe? I don't know, it'd be something like that nowadays. What will we spend that money on? We need to think twice about what we're doing. Councillors really must think twice and not be vexatious about this. It's very, very important. So when call-ins do happen, we must have material planning considerations there. Whether they, you can consult with officers on what those should be, perhaps, but they must be there if you're going to call in, because I can't see it any other way. You don't call in every application, it's just not reasonable. No. That's it, I think, for the moment.
Yes, thank you, Pat. I think you make a really good point there. I'm going to recommend a read to you all. It's called Feminist City by Leslie Kern. It's about how the urban environment has actually historically been designed by men for men, and women and children were not welcome in it. And, you know, it's quite eye-opening, actually, when you see the barriers that were put up historically. So, and obviously we need to consider everybody. You know, if we design a space for the most vulnerable, it's better for everybody. So I think that's a really important point for question 18. So thank you very much for that. I do think we are better at councillor call-ins now than we used to be. We do have to give, members do get asked for material considerations, and I don't think we get as many as we used to at all. Yeah, I think that's fair. Okay, I've got Councillor Cross now, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, it feels a little bit as though our government are sort of putting all local planning authorities into special measures, so to say. You know, this does appear to be, you know, attack on local democracy and decision making. You know, we're hearing this in planning, we're hearing this in licensing. I totally understand that you know, we have a shortage of, say, 1.5 million homes, and also I'm told that we have 1.4 million homes that have been consented but not built. And so I do feel as though a sledgehammer has been applied to the wrong nut. You know, that our government should be putting pressure on getting the consented houses built, those of which we got planning permission, not in making local planning or licensing both, you know, weaker and less democratic. And you know, I also would be looking forward to putting my own representation in along that basis. I absolutely echo the words from Councillor Agar. You know, we need human rights to be factored in, and in terms of inclusivity, I'd love that also to be added for question 18. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Cross. I think it's just worth letting committee know that I actually met with our MP last week to talk about this with Paul and Duncan. And I think this was really important, actually, because it is that thing that we were thinking, you know, you're throwing out the baby with the bathwater here. And, you know, we feel like it's that there's no trust in local officers, local councillors, local authorities for us to do the right thing. And clearly we wanted to demonstrate that we are. So he is going to read our annual report. He's been sent it, I think, and he is taking note of what we're saying today. So I thought that was really important that our MP understood that this city that he represents has a very different planning committee and planning position than he's been talked about in London. So I think that's worth saying. I've now got Councillor Barnes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, the part about only the Chair being involved from now on in decisions, I think is quite dangerous. I think it should involve the Vice Chair as well. I think that this council shows how well it works, how one person being forced to make such crucial decisions in some case could feel very lonely, actually, and quite vulnerable. So I think actually having the Chair and Vice Chair is a really good solution to that. And then going back to the call-ins, I think we'll probably all be talking about that. I almost did a call-in this year, but after I discussed it with the planning officers, expressed my particular concerns and how little tweaks around the edges could make it acceptable, it happened and it didn't ever appear here. So actually, I did influence things without actually needing it to come and taking people's time. There will be times when democratic and local buy-in is much more important, and we do need to be very visible. We bring local knowledge to any contentious situation, and we are able to put conditions on to ameliorate what could be a difficult application and make it a lot better. I'm thinking perhaps of the student accommodation, where we're able to put in a clause to insist that there is 24-hour cover in an old people's complex, so that students did not upset that community. And I think those little differences we make can make an enormous difference to the community around us. So I think from that point of view, having things in committee is really beneficial. I understand that certain other parts of the country, there's more NIMBYism, more brown envelopes, whatever. We don't have it here. We're not a problem. And I think they're legislating for the worst rather than the best. And I think that is always a difficult one. So I would like to think that they can take a more nuanced attitude to planning committees that are doing a great job. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. I mean, in the pre-meeting that Pat and I had with the officers, we agreed that should be chair and vice chair. You know, I think the problem is when you limit it to just 2 people, you're opening yourself up to allegation. It could be like gatekeeperish. You could have, you know, not a particularly good chief planner and not a particularly good chair, you know, and have a brilliant vice chair. So, you know, it's well, maybe. Do you know what I mean? Though we're a brilliant team here, all of us. So, yeah. So I think that's a fair. If we could maybe amend that in the response, I think most people would probably like that. Happy to have that changed to our response to say that we'd prefer it to include the vice chair. Reg?
Thank you, Chair. You're talking about the gateway test element?
Question 6, yeah, the gateway test, it requires agreement between chief planner and chair, and we've said this is considered to be suitable, although the ability to delegate the function would be needed. So I think another thing would be to say, you know, if this is what happens, we'd prefer it to include the vice chair.
My point there, Chair, is that potentially, I think I'm perhaps just reiterating what's already been said, but potentially nothing could come to planning committee, could it? If the head of
Yeah, I think what we're saying is, if you disregard everything else and this all goes through, and this is the only change we can make, it's a good one. I think that's what we're saying. So we're just yeah, okay, fine. And what else did you say? You said something really good, Jenny. Yeah, it's that thing about the local councillor knowing and listening to the resident. A resident who's got a neighbour who proposes to do something that will impact them day and night for the whole time that they live there. You know, it might be minor to the whole country, but it's major to them and their you know, how they can enjoy their space and their home. So I totally agree on that. I've now got Councillor Kimberley. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think it's really important when we're looking at sort of planning reform that we sort of keep our sense of proportion. I think that sharp language and strong feelings tend to abound when it comes to planning, and I think feeling and emotion can sometimes be the death of reason. And I think that we've got to keep a sense of proportion about the reforms that are in front of us today and the proposal that the government is considering and that we're being consulted on. I think there is absolutely a trade-off. Wherever you draw the line, there will be cases that fall on the wrong side of it. The government is proposing to move that line, and inevitably that is going to lead to people feeling that new cases fall on the wrong side of that line. I think that the really key point in the response that you've drafted, which I think is actually very good, is that we are a district council. We're a very different beast from a large unitary or from a county council, and I think therein lies the problem. At the scale of a unitary council, you might have more than 100 councillors, and if each one of them submitted objections to specific developments happening in each of their wards, that council could be kept very, very busy doing little else other than responding to member call-ins. At the level of a district council, we have 35. And with 35 councillors, that probability is just much, much lower. The threshold is much lower. And as you've said, we have not had that kind of volume of vexatious call-ins that has obviously triggered this response from the government. So I think that the response we need to make is that some consideration needs to be made for the remaining lifetime of district councils like ours, that there should be a minimum threshold, as you have suggested, for the number of complaints or the number of appeals, rather, that are upheld before action is taken. I think in terms of a threshold for whether an application is considered contentious, perhaps a lower number is needed for an area like Worcester, because, again, we are a smaller council, we're not necessarily going to get thousands of objections or hundreds of objections. The other bit I was going to get at, on question 14, we haven't suggested a minimum size for the size of the committee. I would like to suggest one at about 7. I think if we fall below 7, you end up with the difficult situation that if one, you've got a scenario where 1 or 2 wards are affected by a planning application, you could end up with almost the entire committee excluded, and you haven't got a quorum to make decisions with. So I would suggest it would be nice for us to offer a minimum number based on our own experiences. I shall leave it there. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Councillor Kimberley, it's interesting that you've brought up unitary, because actually this document doesn't really talk about it, which seems like to me this is being done at the wrong time. And if it was being done in consideration of a unitary, things might be different. But what worries me, in your comment, is that if we become a unitary, it means councillors still don't have the opportunity to call in, and residents still don't have a voice. So yeah, I'm a bit worried about that. I think in a unitary, if we lose this right for a call-in, and we lose this right for a resident to come and speak at planning committee to something that really matters to them, that's not a good thing about going unitary. And unitary shouldn't be about reducing democracy. And this is what I believe these proposals would do. Do I have any other Councillor Reg, did you want to say something? Because you did start. Thank you.
Yes, Chair, thank you. Again, I'm minded of the fact that we do represent residents, not national government, and that's the whole point of having a city council. And so I do wonder whether there is a case for the planning committee to allow residents to speak. Perhaps I'm just repeating what you said, but I think that's an important element, and I worry that the alternative is just to get rid of the planning committee altogether, and you say we entrust the officers, they know what they're doing, but I think that would be a really, really retrograde step, and I know it's a difficult balance to find, but I worry about whether there's potentially less transparency in this proposal, because you could, at least with the current system, you feel there's a degree of transparency. There's a concern has been expressed. It's been debated, and residents feel that they've been heard, even if they don't agree with the decision. That process of being heard, I think, is important. So I'm cautious about this. I can see where the government maybe thinks where they want to go, which is to get rid of all planning, and then they can just do whatever they want and do it very quickly. But personally, I think that's an unhealthy route.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Reg. Out of interest, Paul, in our annual report, have you got how many applications go through delegation already without coming to committee, or like the percentage? Yeah, because I do feel like officers do a lot already without coming to committee. We don't have, we haven't got any applications coming today. It's, I think that shows you really, doesn't it? Because it's not that they're not getting applications in, because they're doing a lot. So, I just think, there's an awful lot of work that goes on in the background. I think, Jenny, you talked about this. The councillor brings up issues with a local application, and there's a lot of work that goes on in the background. And I think local councillors are doing this all the time. Perhaps the government doesn't realise that a good councillor does this. Maybe they don't think that we do. I don't know.
Through you, Chair, just looking back at the quarter stats, it ranges, but on average, it's around about between 93 and 97%. So for quarter 4, for example, 24-25, that was 88%, but then quarter 1 for 25-26 was 97%. So we're always, if we say 90% of applications are delegated and 10% are looked at by committee. And I think it's a standard gauge that I would like to use, that when you get sort of 3 to 4 applications a month, that's about right, isn't it? 4 feels a little bit heavy, 2 seems a little bit less, but about 3, and that's tend to be what I feel that office provide as an agenda for you. For example, last year, for 24-25, we had 2 committees cancelled because there was no business. We haven't had that so far this year, but you know, you don't know where that's going to go. But we don't feel that we're pushing too many things your way, and we feel that actually we've got the balance quite right at the moment. So I think that's something that we can express to government.
Yes, thank you. And the just something else I want to say, you know, in the report you talked about training, and you know, we recently had some planning training again. We didn't, I think a lot of us didn't have to do it, but there was a really good turnout from people, so thank you. And the thing is we do know that there's a lot of change in planning, so training is important, and that's why we're getting officers to do it. What I'm a bit concerned about is that training might become some kind of nationally imposed thing, which isn't always changed to suit local issues. And of course then, well, who would pay for it? You know, would the council have to pay for someone to come in and do it to make sure it's the training that's being delivered everywhere? You know, how far does this top-down business go? That's what I'm concerned about. I saw another hand go up. Councillor Kinsley.
Thank you, Chair. I think, just thinking of the words from the Councillor Oodle across the way, we're in the Department of saying yes but rather than no and that's from a recent committee. So I think, you know, none of us are particularly, well, most of us are not liking what we're seeing, but we're thinking it's coming our way. Let's try and make it as palatable as possible. Under question 2, it says at the end, I mean, it seems to be the kind of the nub of our various concerns, and I don't know whether we can strengthen that wording where it says a more tailored list based on the circumstances. And I'm struggling to think of what that might be, but could we give some example of how that would look, make it easy for them to pick that up and say, oh yes, actually we can do that for a smaller area, and to maybe beef up those arguments that we've just been talking about in terms of the numbers and how well it works at the moment. You know, there isn't actually really that much of a problem to solve, but you know, we can make some tweaks. But whether it's possible to come up with a little bit more detail there. As I say, I'm struggling at the moment to think what that could be, but you know, officers will be in a better place to think of that. The other thing that occurs to me as well, they're talking about the training. They're talking about upskilling planning committee members, and yet taking away a lot of what they want to talk about. And I think it's a little bit of a waste of what's the point? Yes, you know, waste of trained up people. So thank you.
Totally agree. I've got Councillor Agar again. Thank you.
Yes, and why would you bother to do the training and actually be involved if there wasn't enough of it to make decisions about, if you know what I mean? No, that's true. I'd like, this is about a question which isn't actually here, which I think maybe should be thought about. And the thing is, it's implicit in the fact that we're being consulted at all. It's implicit in the fact that we've got reform about to go on. And that is to say that if a council planning service is placed into special measures, and we came perilously close once ourselves, before our current regime dragged us up by our bootstraps and made us excellent, of course. So I'm very pleased to say that that's happened, but it was stressful, I've got to say, and there were lots of things we weren't being told. Now, there are going to be councils in that situation. At the moment, the threat is you'll be taken over by the government inspector and they will be making all the planning decisions because you're not doing well enough. You get that sort of thing happening in schools, but what they tend to do about it is to twin you with another school, with another head teacher who actually is excellent, and they say, okay, try this as an example and interact with this other school that really is doing it okay. I actually think that would be a better way to do things, because we know what excellent is ourselves. And I think actually we've got a lot to teach others. And I think that will be true of a number of councils around the country. It's complex, and it's much more complex than putting a technocrat in charge. And I think actually this, you know, how we make decisions is like that. And I think actually that would be a better way of doing things if a service, a planning service, was not doing so well. Just a thought.
Great, thank you, Pat. Do I have any other questions or comments? No. So to sum up then, I think you've taken some notes, Paul. Will we basically, you'll relook at it and then send out another draft, or what's the plan? Thank you.
So if members are happy with the recommendation, I will take on board all of the comments that have been made, make some of the tweaks that have been generally agreed by the committee in terms of the additional questions, and I will share that with the chair and vice chair and submit that by the deadline of the 23rd of July.
Councillor Kinsley?
Just a quick question, which I forgot to ask before. Do we know the timescale for the whole process, when it's likely to actually be implemented?
Through you, Chair, no.
Well, let's just hope it takes a while. That's all I can say. So are we happy with the recommendation? It's the Planning Committee authorises Head of Planning and Economic Development in consultation with Chair and Vice Chair of Planning Committee to submit a consultation response based on the draft that is included in Appendix 1 and will be amended. Would you like to summarise the amendments or not really?
I can summarise the amendments.
Go on.
So essentially we're looking at providing somewhere within the response about the right to be heard, and essentially bring that in. We will look at question 18 in terms of the inclusivity of planning applications. We will look at the gateway tests, including chair and vice chair. We will look at a minimum threshold for contentious applications, bringing in a number for a minimum of the committee, a suggestion of 7, and look at a more tailored list of question 2. I believe that was everything.
Yeah. Are we all happy with that? Oh, do I have to have a vote? Yeah, let's have a vote then, so it's clear. Yeah. So let's have a vote. All in favour of the recommendation, as amended. Yeah. Abstentions? Objections? Councillor Amos, recorded. Thank you. Okay. So I have any other business.